Hey, what's up guys? I'm BTC. Today I want to talk to you about D.Va and where she is in the game right now, because there's a lot of kind of conflicting information out there. Some people are saying, oh, she's still very much a tank. Other people are saying, oh, she's this kind of DPS tank hybrid. Others are saying that, oh, she's just a straight DPS, or she's like a worse version of Soldier 76 or something. So there's a lot of conflicting information out there, and I went and did a whole bunch of different tests, and I want to show you exactly where the character is in terms of her tanking capability and damage and all that sort of stuff. Quick reminder that there is a $20 Steam gift card giveaway going on this week. All you have to do to enter is be a subscriber, hit that notification bell, and then leave a comment below. Then I will pick a winner at the end of the week. Alright, so before we can even talk about where D.Va is gonna fall in the game in her current state, in terms of what role she's going to play and what she's capable of doing, we have to break this mentality that the groupings that Blizzard gives the character is absolute. Even they have admitted that the characters are not stuck in these kind of hard and fast kind of classes. Like, just because something is in the tank role or the offense role doesn't mean that's the only thing that they can do. So they're more of a hybrid, is what Blizzard says that they kind of want to explain their characters as being, right? So with that in mind, when you look at the different character groupings, you have the offensive, the defensive, the tank, and the support. So we're going to primarily focus on the tank category. And just because something is in the tank category doesn't mean that it's actually a tank. And this is something that a lot of people have a very, very difficult time understanding. You have to think outside the box. So the definition of a tank is something that has a large amount of health or a lot of sustainability, and this is very important, and they have to be able to consistently defend their team or prevent damage to their team. And this needs to be a kind of constant or nearly ongoing process. You can't just throw out an ability, have it last for like a second or two, and then consider that as tanking. And this is where it's really important, because a character must have both of those things in order to actually be a tank. Because if you look at some of the other characters, like Genji for example, his deflect basically does the same thing as defense matrix, but he doesn't have the health pool to really sustain it. And with Symmetra, well, she has a giant shield that she can constantly throw out, but again, she doesn't have the health pool to sustain it. But then if you look on the other side, you have a character like Roadhog, who has a very large health pool and crazy amounts of sustain with his new Take a Breather ability, but he doesn't actually have any way to defend his team other than simply standing in the way. And even then, it only works if the enemy team is dumb enough to target the Roadhog instead of the much squishier DPS and support members of Roadhog's team. So real quick, we have to talk about something called center mass, because it's really important when it applies to D.Va's mech, because it makes the mech a lot worse than it really should be. So center mass is just what it sounds like. It's the center of whatever target you're trying to shoot at. Your brain naturally, instinctively wants to aim towards the middle of the target, just because it makes it a lot easier for you to actually hit the target. Now, a good player is going to try to counteract this and force himself to actually aim up higher and try to get that headshot for the critical bonus damage. Now, there is kind of a risk-reward situation when you're trying to get these criticals for every single character in the game, except for D.Va's mech. And the reason for that is because when you aim up high, you're aiming at a much smaller target than, you know, just the center mass here. You're not just aiming at this big area. Because if you don't hit exactly center mass, then what ends up happening is if you're a little bit to the left, a little bit to the right, a little top, a little bottom, then you're still going to hit the target and you're still going to do damage. But when you're aiming at the head, if you're a little bit to the left or a little bit to the right or a little bit up, then you miss the target, and instead of doing double damage or crit damage, you do 0 damage. So there's kind of like a risk to it. Now, if you aim a little bit low, then you just end up getting like a body shot or something like that, and that's perfectly fine. But here's the thing, with D.Va's mech, it doesn't work like that at all. Alright, so now let's talk about D.Va, because the situation with the mech is the exact opposite of the other characters. So first of all, the critical hitbox is gigantic. It's the largest in the game, it's about twice the size of most of the other characters. Now, the other really big problem with this is that the critical hit box is not located at the top of the character. So there's no kind of like risk-reward situation like with Soldier 76 or Reaper or any of the other characters where you have to aim up a little bit and then you might miss or you might get a critical. With D.Va, all you have to do is aim dead center and you're going to get those critical shots, because that's where the critical box is. So your natural, instinctive center aim is going to help you get criticals. So if the D.Va mech is facing you, like she would need to do in order to actually tank, then it's easier to land a critical than it is to land a normal shot. If you wanted to land a normal shot, you would actually have to go out of your way to try to aim for like the legs or the side of the mech or something like that. But if D.Va is facing you, then you're always going to be able to land those critical hit shots all the time whenever you're fighting the mech. So knowing all this, how easy is it to destroy the mech compared to killing some of the other characters that are tanks or just have very high health pools? So let's find out. In this first test, no defensive abilities are going to be used. So this first test result was actually a bit surprising. I couldn't believe that Zarya lasted longer than the D.Va mech, even though the mech has an extra 200 armor. That gigantic critical box that's located center mass is just way too much of a disadvantage for the mech. Alright, so of course your opponent is not just going to stand there and let you shoot them, so let's try it while using the defensive abilities. So in this one, the D.Va defense matrix allowed for the mech to survive a tiny bit longer than Zarya could with her bubble, but for the most part, it's pretty much the same time, and they were both actually quite fast compared to the other characters. After them was Winston and Roadhog. Funny enough, Mei survived for a very long time because the ice block and the ice wall are just incredibly good at soaking up a tremendous amount of damage. After that, Reinhardt did eventually die when the shield was destroyed. Orisa never actually died because the single damage coming from the soldier was not enough to ever break through the shield before it could be replaced. Alright, but in a real game, you're going to have healers who try to keep their team alive. So how does this affect all of the characters? Well, for the other ones, like Reinhardt, Orisa, Winston, Roadhog, it makes them even more difficult to kill. But for D.Va, it really doesn't affect anything, because even that single soldier who is not even using the Helix rocket, mind you, just shooting at the D.Va with normal left click, you can still do more damage than the Mercy is capable of actually healing through. So that means that in order for the D.Va to really survive in that mech, she has to disengage from the fight quite often. Or you have to basically turn around and not face the enemy. So these are things that make the D.Va mech just not really viable in a tanking position. Because if you're standing there in the front of your team with the D.Va mech, then you're going to get destroyed very quickly. It doesn't matter if you use your defense matrix because it only lasts for 2 seconds, and it doesn't matter if you have a healer because they're going to be able to chew through that armor and chew through the mech way faster than the healer can possibly keep you alive. Okay, so you can't play D.Va like you would play a Reinhardt or Orisa. Instead, you play like a Winston and you dive in the enemy backline. Except, there's a really big problem with this. You see, when Winston jumps in and he engages the backline of the enemy, he can still attack while using his defensive capabilities. He can drop the bubble, deal all the damage that he needs to, maybe kill off a support or something, and then he can leap out. And he can do that because the bubble is still up while he's trying to deal damage. However, with D.Va, when she engages like that, she basically has to choose, do you want to do damage or do you want to have your defensive stuff? Because she cannot shoot while she's using that defense matrix, even though it only lasts for 2 seconds anyways. Yeah, you can use your micro missiles, but the damage on that stuff is really bad. You only do a very small amount of damage with the missiles if you manage to hit every single one of them, and even then, it's still barely better than a Helix rocket. So there is another problem also with the damage that D.Va can output. So there's something really stupid about D.Va's damage output that I need to point out to you guys. And it's the fact that her two primary sources of damage, which is her left click, the cannons, and then her ability, the micro missiles, do not support each other. Instead, they oppose each other. Now, yes, you can use both of them at the same time, but it's not as good as you might think. The reason being is the left click is a hit scan. It means as soon as you press the button, it's going to instantly damage anybody that your crosshair is on. And it doesn't matter if they're right next to you, or if they're really, really far away from you, the damage is still instant. Now, obviously, a really far away target is not going to take much damage, but you still get the idea. You instantly damage the target. Now, for the micro missiles, however, it's a projectile. Now, the difference is, you cannot aim directly at a target with a projectile, you have to aim where they're going. So let me show you here. If I were to try to attack these bots that are moving around, if I want to hit them with the left click, I have to aim directly at them. If I want to hit them with the micro missiles, I have to aim in front of them. So in order to land both of the abilities, I have to simultaneously aim at them and in front of them. And if that sounds dumb, it's because it is. The only way you can actually land both attacks at the same time is if you're point blank with the target, which means you're almost certainly going to get demeched, or if your opponent is kind of dumb and they're standing still or they're running directly at you. If that's the case, then yeah, you're going to hit both targets. But for the overwhelming vast majority of players, they're going to be moving around, which means that most of your micro missiles are probably going to miss, or you're just not going to be able to hit them with a lot of your left click. Now, I know what some of you might be saying. Well, what about Soldier 76? Doesn't he work the same way? You know, his left click is a hit scan, but his right click is a projectile, and Soldier 76 works just fine, so shouldn't D.Va? No, the main difference is that Soldier 76's Helix rocket, his projectile attack, is not a channeled ability. You just press it once, and it fires out the rocket and it deals its damage. So you have to lead them a little bit in order to hit them with the Helix, but then you go right back to aiming at the target in order to actually hit them. So when they're moving, you fire a little bit ahead, but then you go back to shooting at the target. But with D.Va, you cannot do that. With D.Va, because it's a channeled ability, you have to consistently aim in two locations at once. So you have to aim in front of the target in order to lead them, and then you also have to aim at the target in order to deal the damage with your hit scan. Or at least in order to deal a lot of damage. Because if you are left clicking, because it's kind of like this kind of shotgun spread kind of attack, if you're leading the target, then yeah, you're going to do a little bit of damage, but you're still missing the bulk of your damage. So either you do less with the micro missiles, or you do less with the left click. But you can't have the full potential of both at the same time, unless your target is dumb and just standing still. So what's the conclusion here? Is D.Va a tank? Is she a DPS tank? Is she just a plain DPS? Is she something else entirely? Well, let's run through it. Is D.Va a tank? The answer is definitely no, she is not. She does not have the survivability to be a tank. Even though she has a boatload of health and armor, that gigantic critical hitbox makes it so that anytime she's even looking in someone's general direction, they're going to be landing critical shots, and D.Va is going to get demeched incredibly fast and quite often. The other problem with her being a tank is the defense matrix is now garbage. Yes, you can use it to absorb a few shots here and there, but with only 2 seconds of uptime, and then it takes another 8 full seconds or so in order to recharge, that is simply not reliable enough defense in order to protect your team. So is D.Va a DPS tank? Again, the answer is no. She is not a tank. She does not have really any survivability at all. Despite the fact that she's got all of that health and the defense matrix, it doesn't do enough. Whenever you fly in to the enemy team in the backline, you might get 1 kill if you're lucky, but then you're instantly going to be demeched and then just killed by the remainder of the enemy team. On top of that, the damage output that D.Va has is not that good. Yes, she got an overall damage increase simply because they added the micro missiles, but it's not good enough. If you actually wanted a tanky character to attack the enemy backline, Winston is a much better choice. Or you could just go full out DPS and have a Genji or a Tracer do it. So what about just plain DPS? If she's not really able to tank, what if she just gave up on that part altogether and only tried to do DPS? My question would be, why would you even bother? Right? Basically, the current version of D.Va is kind of like a flying budget Soldier 76, right? Like, there's no reason to use D.Va in place of another damage dealer. If you need really strong long-range damage, then take Soldier or McCree. If you need kind of divey, flanky damage to hit the enemy backline, then go with a Genji or a Tracer. There just really isn't any reason to use D.Va. So does this mean that D.Va is complete and total garbage? No, I think there are still some places where you could actually use her, especially on the competitive ladder, on the middle to lower ranks, where kind of anything goes. I mean, at that point, it really doesn't matter. You could probably still use D.Va and still be effective. Funny enough, the pick rate for D.Va in the lower skill brackets has actually increased, but for the high skill brackets, the pick rate for D.Va has decreased. And obviously that just goes to show that the higher skill players realize that the character is simply not as effective as it needs to be. Again, if you need a tank, then pick someone who is actually a tank. And if you need a DPS, then pick someone who is actually a DPS. So really, I think it can be summed up that Blizzard nerfed D.Va so much that she's no longer actually good at any particular thing. They nerfed her into mediocrity. And now, while she can be useful in some places, you're just better off taking someone else. That's pretty much it. Another thing to keep in mind is a while ago, they nerfed D.Va's armor because she had defense matrix and it was just way too good having all that armor and defense matrix. But then they went ahead and they nerfed defense matrix, but they never actually reverted the armor change. So now D.Va has a very small amount of armor and her defense matrix is pretty much garbage. So the first thing that I think Blizzard needs to do is they need to revert the armor change, and then the second thing is they need to do something about that stupid critical box because it's just gigantic. It's the size of a bus. I think if Blizzard did those two things, it would significantly improve where D.Va is. Anyways, guys, I'm sure some of you are gonna agree, some of you are gonna disagree. Let me know in the comments section. Also, don't forget to check out my Discord server and follow me on Twitter. The links for that stuff is down below. Thanks for watching. Remember, always blame the controller because it's never your fault. Also, special thanks to all my Patreon supporters for helping to make this all possible. If you'd like to see what kind of cool rewards you can get for supporting the channel, check the links on screen and down below.